What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Dolphins In Depth podcast. I'm Daniel Oyefusi. That is David Neal. Thanks so much for tuning in. Quick reminder before we start, make sure to subscribe to the Miami Herald YouTube page, like, share, comment, as well as subscribe to the Miami Herald. And you definitely want to be subscribed to the Miami Herald
That one. Yeah.
because the Dolphins just wrapped up their final cuts to get to their initial 2023 53-man roster. And there were a lot of moves made in the final hours, right down to the minute before they submitted that final roster to the NFL ahead of the 4 p.m. deadline. They reworked one contract. They made a pair of trades, but neither was the highly anticipated and speculated trade for Indianapolis Colts running back Jonathan Seiler. He's remaining in Indianapolis for the time being. We're going to get to that, but we got to start with a lot of major moves that were made in Miami Gardens not too long ago. Just got back from speaking to Mike McDaniel, a couple players. They had practice earlier. And again, the initial 53-man roster is set, and I keep on emphasizing initial because there's still going to be a lot of moves to be made in the next couple of days before the season kicks off for real against the Los Angeles Chargers on September 10th. Got a couple guys that need to be placed on IR, a couple guys who, might be brought back, just as temporary cuts. But again, the major three moves I would say is first, the Dolphins officially parting ways with 2020 first-round pick Noah Igbinoghene. Now, he didn't play much. He, was really more of a disappointment his first couple of years, but it looked like he may have been kind of turning the corner this summer. He had a pretty good training camp. He looked like he was in a better fit scheme-wise with Vic Fangio. He was one of those guys who was competing to replace Jalen Ramsey, who's going to be out till about December with his knee injury. But ultimately, they traded him for 2021 second-round pick Kelvin Joseph, who himself hasn't played that much with the Cowboys, but he has a little more versatility. He's played special teams. They essentially do a swap for swap. They save a little bit of money, and they get a guy who may be able to contribute on game days. And
Your
then,
disappointment for our disappointment.
yeah, I mean,
Let's see if the new clothes make the better man in each case.
swap for swap, and we'll see what we can do with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was an interesting move right there. We didn't see Noah. Again, the team held practice at about 2 p.m. There were a couple guys who were practicing. Again, we've been seeing 90 guys at practice for the past month. So they have one roster cut down date instead of three that they've had before. So there were about 35 40 guys at practice. One, because they cut a lot of guys in the past 2 days. Second, just because of the nature of the injuries that they have, so many guys are out. So we didn't see Noah. Start to get a little skeptical, like, what's going on? Is he hurt? Is he cut? I mean, that's the first inclination. And later on, the news came out that he was being traded. The second trade was materialized Monday night, with the Dolphins sending offensive lineman Dan Feeney to the Chicago Bears for a 2024 sixth-round pick. Feeney was signed from the New York Jets to a one-year deal. He was kind of projected to be in the running for the left guard spot, but that never materialized. He was kind of the backup center, but now they sent him off. They take a little bit of a dead cap hit, but they get a late-round pick for a guy who clearly wasn't in their plans. And then kind of wrapping up the transactions for today, they reworked Cedric Wilson Jr.'s contract. The wide receiver was a highly speculated trade target throughout the offseason after not really playing much in his first season in Miami. He said that he wanted to be in Miami. General manager Chris Greer said that he wanted to do right by him. Ultimately, I guess they did right by both sides because they slashed part of that contract. They got rid of the 2024 season. They lowered his salary in 2023, and they added some incentives. So if he does become a bigger part of the offense, he can get some of that money back. So those were the three kind of major transactions. Obviously, they had a second wave of cuts, and we're going to get into that. But yeah, a lot going on today. And again, this is just the beginning. There's still going to be some tinkering with the roster. As we kind of get into that, what stood out to me on this initial roster was, again, I kind of anticipated that there would be a lot of movement. I didn't anticipate some of these trades and whatnot. But the very nature of the Dolphins roster and some of these injuries, these major injuries that they're dealing with, kind of made, it kind of made the roster kind of wonky. There's four guys right now that look like they're going to be placed on IR and knocked out for at least the first month and definitely longer. You got Jalen Ramsey, as you mentioned before. He's got the meniscus injury. He's out for a while. Elijah Campbell, the defensive back, just got hurt in the preseason finale. It sounds like he's going to be out for a while with a chance to return later. And then you've got Rob Jones, the offensive lineman, as well as I'm blanking on the last person right now. Well, there were a couple guys that were projected that might be on IR, but they got cut. But those three guys are definitely going on IR. So just the way the kind of roster machinations and the rules play out is that you have to keep them on the initial 53-man roster. And then the day afterward, you can place them on IR, and then that makes them eligible to return. If you don't do that, if you place them on IR before the 53-man roster cut down, they're out for the year. We saw that with Keon Crossan and tight end Eric Saubert. Those guys are out for the year, barring an injury settlement. So you have some kind of weird roster configurations where the Dolphins keep 5 running backs. They cut Myles Gaskin, and they kept Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert, Savon Ahmed, Devon Achane, the rookie, and Chris Brooks, the undrafted rookie, who had a really good preseason and a really good training camp. He scored 3 times in the preseason. He's a hard runner. But then you have some spots where there's no depth at all. They keep 2 tight ends, and one of them being an undrafted rookie in Julian Hill. You go to defensive line where they have 5 guys, but they really don't have much depth outside of Christian Wilkins, Zach Seiler, Emmanuel Agba, and Raekwon Davis. And Agba isn't really a defensive lineman now; he's a linebacker. They kept Brandon Peely as an undrafted rookie, but they really don't have a lot of depth there. I think that's a spot that they could be looking for some additions. And then you look at defensive back, where they got rid of Igbenogany and they got Kelvin Joseph. But what are you going to do at cornerback? There's nobody that really distinguished themselves at corner, in terms of replacing Ramsey. We got Kader Kohu and Xavier Howard, but the third cornerback never really materialized. So is it going to be Eli Apple, who they added, a week in a training camp? Is it going to be the rookie Cam Smith, who got beat on a deep pass in the preseason game? There's still some questions with this roster. And, I think the Dolphins recognize that as well. So it's going to be interesting. We just talked to Mike McDaniel, about 3 hours ago before we're recording this. We're going to talk to Chris Greer on Wednesday. This roster is still in flux, I would say.
Oh yeah, but I mean, the NFL does a great job of creating events. Okay, they're great at that, and they've made the draft into just this monster event, right? Everything now at the NFL is a monster event, and this day it's certainly it's it's kind of a landmark day. It's a signpost. Okay, you have you get down to the 53, and then everybody starts looking at who everybody else.
You got the waiver claim coming up, tomorrow.
Right. And then this is okay. This is the 53 for today.
Yeah, that's why everyone's saying initial. Even the Dolphins tweeted out, "This is our initial
50." Right. But the NFL, it's they've created the event, and so here we are on Tuesday. We're watching, and they did. I think it's smart that they eliminated those stages of cuts. Like, okay, let's we'll give you one real deadline.
I don't know, man. It was kind of a hectic. I kind of wish they did the 3 cuts. I was scrambling right as McDaniel was talking, trying to see who they cut, who they kept. It was all over the place.
This is again creating an event. It's creating the event day, and the NFL is great at that. So, yeah, there's the Dolphins roster looks funky in some places, but you also know they very rarely do they make do something and we see something and they don't see it also. They see it. They know what they're doing. They have some semblance of knowing what they're doing at least. And so they're probably sitting there going, okay, this is what we have, but we've got our eyes on a few different situations that, we're going to see how they play out to fill out the roster. And by the time the season starts, the roster is going to look a little more, within the bell curve. And with a couple touches of funkiness, yeah, they're probably not going to have, some teams are going to have 17 tight ends. The Dolphins maybe have 3. So, but it's going to look a little more symmetrical as like NFL symmetrical by
Yeah,
the time it's
it's
all said and done. It's
yeah.
but yeah, so it's again, it's something fun to talk about for today, and we can sit here and kick back. Okay, why did they keep X guy or Y guy, and
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like it
some of
really
those
did.
choices.
It really did seem that, like, they came again. We were watching practice at 2. Again, they were guys who had made the roster and were not practicing. Guys who didn't make the roster and were practicing. So that just tells you how it came. I mean, just to give you an example. I mean, our own Barry Jackson reported that Verone McKinley was told that he was being released, and then with the hope of being re-signed to the 53 after some, post cut down day shuffling. So that was the expectation. And, the roster comes out and you don't see his name among the cuts. And it turns out that, they work some stuff around and they decide, hey, we're going to keep you. So that just kind of speaks to how fluid this is. Again, there's a lot of different various roster rules that take place, like for the vested veterans who have 4 years or more in the NFL. Those guys are cut and they don't have to go through waivers. They can't be claimed by another team. They're free to sign with anybody. So you have some of these veteran cuts like linebacker Malik Reed, defensive lineman Deshaun Hand, maybe even wide receiver Robbie Chosen, who wasn't really a surprise to me as a cut. May have been to others, but wasn't really to me. Any one of those guys are free to sign with any team, including the Dolphins. So again, sometimes it may be like a wink, wink, handshake agreement that, hey, we're going to cut you first. We're going to bring you back. And also, if you don't sign, if you wait till after week 1 to sign those veterans, they don't count. Their salaries aren't guaranteed. So again, there's a lot of roster manipulation and stuff going on around this time of year, because you want to keep your guys, make the best roster you can, but also, stay cap compliant as well. So again, between now and even
that one-on-one discussions or prior discussion with the agent or with the player, that happens a lot. That happens a lot. Okay, look, we really want you. We really should. So just just we're cutting you now, but you're not really unemployed.
Yeah.
You're not really fired. Don't pack your desk just yet. Or if you pack it, keep the box by the door. So
Like, you'll be back soon. Yeah, I mean, McDaniel said, hey, I think sometimes it's kind of lip service, it's kind of coach speak, but McDaniel did say, hey, we have way more players that deserve to be on the roster than we have NFL spots. And again, I think that just the fluidity of the roster in the next 24, 48 hours will kind of speak to that. So again, initial 53-man roster, we'll see what they do with waivers. We'll see what they do with the practice squad. And a lot of those guys on the practice squad end up playing, because they end up on a 53 in a couple of weeks as well. So a lot of fluidity with this roster. The other thing I want to touch on before we get to a short break, the highly speculated potential trade for Indianapolis Colts running back Jonathan Taylor did not materialize. He was not traded to any team. He remains an Indianapolis Colt, but he's going to start the year on the reserve, physically unable to perform list. He's been there throughout training camp and throughout the summer. Again, the Dolphins were they were engaged in trade talks with the Colts. It seemed like the Colts wanted a first-round pick, or they wanted a package of picks that were equivalent to that. Ultimately, the Dolphins don't make that trade. They've been linked to a lot of running backs throughout this offseason, throughout the past couple months. We know about Dalvin Cook and how he ended up with the Jets. But for now, they're going with their group, the group that they've, said very positive things about, but have also looked to find an upgrade in the room.
Did you notice that nobody else traded for Jonathan Taylor either?
Well, it seemed like the Colts wanted a ransom.
Yeah, I mean and as the Colts should try to get, should hold out for their best deal if they think there's several teams with interest. Why not?
It seemed like it was reported that there was a Tuesday deadline. Like, pretty much they wanted to get this resolved by the cut down day. But, as former Herald reporter and current ESPN reporter Stephen Holder reported, the real deadline is, in October, when you get to the regular season trade deadline. Like, that's the real deadline. So this is something that could kind of continue to percolate in the coming weeks and months, as maybe the Colts come down on their offer, maybe a team is more willing to meet what the Colts want. I would say this isn't over yet, but for now, the Dolphins are I don't want to say they swung and they missed, but they didn't reach the finish line, and they're gonna go with their
Yeah.
current group right now.
And of course, so everything depends on how the year starts. If the year starts well, um, you know, if it ain't, if it ain't broke, you know, don't trade to try and fix it. Make the smart trade of not trading. And if it turns out that they look at their team, they look at their group and they say, yeah, what we need here is a higher level of running back to really make this work and work in a big way. Well, then they'll be back to Indianapolis with a bigger dowry.
Yeah, I mean they haven't. I mean they made a trade deadline deal last year for Bradley Chubb because they wanted to juice up the pass rush, and
Yeah,
they were willing to make that deal and give him the they were able to make that trade and give him the
give him
contract that
money.
he wanted right afterward. So I
So
mean, there were definitely a lot of moving parts to it. I know that as the Dolphins started to trade some guys and free up some cap space with Cedric Wilson, there was definitely a lot of kind of eyebrows raised, like what are they doing right there? They maybe freeing up some money. I never really thought that they needed to free up this cap space to make a deal work. I've been saying I wouldn't have made that trade, especially if it cost the high price and the contract, because I think that this current group as constructed is good enough to complement. I'll say it's good enough to complement the passing game. And we saw in the preseason, it's just preseason, but we saw them run the ball with a lot of effectiveness. And it wasn't just like Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson didn't play at all. We saw Savon Ahmed run the ball well. We saw Chris Brooks. Like, I don't, the way injuries pan out in the NFL. I mean, Chris Brooks could be a guy that you end up relying on. And I'm not saying he's, completely ready to do that, but he looked good in the preseason as an undrafted rookie. He definitely earned his spot on the 53. I've been saying it a lot. I think that the running back position for this group, for this team specifically, and in the NFL, I would say for the Dolphin situation, it was definitely a luxury. There's no doubt that they want to
yeah,
improve the running game, but I think that they have the guys to do it. And I think early on we're going to see if all that talk about improving the run game was lip service or not. But I'm of the belief that I think that we'll see a much improved running game in 2023. Regardless of upgrades or not.
yeah, I think we'll see an improved running game because I think, well, as we've discussed before, I think they'll be more confident and stay with it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
and
that's what
they'll,
it's really about. It's about the
yeah.
volume and the commitment, not
And
necessarily the actual production at the
right,
end.
yeah, I mean, you're gonna it, you NFL coaches. It's interesting. The better NFL coaches have a high degree, have a high like panic level, and or they have a high one compared to most NFL coaches, where the panic level starts real fast.
Mm-hmm.
You reach that level really quickly at like 7-0, and heaven forbid you go down 10-0, and most NFL coaches they're wanting to fire everybody. They're cutting people on sidelines. They're barely holding it together, and that's when you see teams like abandon the run. And, oh my goodness, we got to throw to catch up. And you're like, dude, it's only the second quarter. You still have time to establish a running game. You still have time to make the running game a part of your offense, and you still have to but you still have to stop them on the other side of the ball. It's not like that much has changed, but that's where I think experience helps a coach, is that panic level moves up. And I think that the panic level will be higher for Mike McDaniel this year. And that will that'll open things up and help the offense out overall. I mean, just the knowledge that sometimes it's just the knowledge that you will do something. You don't necessarily have to do it, but the knowledge that you might do it and you are willing to do it, that makes the defense adjust to that and opens up the other possibilities. So
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said about, for all the improvements and the growth of the team and the players, a lot to be said about that for Mike McDaniel in year one, the lessons learned from that, and, kind of correcting those rookie coach mistakes. So it's going to be interesting to see how he learns from that 2022 season. All right, we're gonna take a short break, but when we come back on the side of things, the Dolphins over the weekend locked up one of their top 2024 free agents. But another top free agent is still searching for a new deal. We actually heard from both of them this afternoon. We're going to talk about Zach Seiler, Christian Wilkins, and what Seiler's new deal may mean for his good friend Wilkins. We'll be back soon, so stay locked with us. What's going on, everybody? Still here on the Dolphins In Depth podcast, talking all things Dolphins with David Neal. Now, in the first half, we talked about the Dolphins' initial 53-man roster, the various moves they made, and the moves that they didn't make for Jonathan Taylor, who remains in Indianapolis Colt. But there was some news over the weekend after the preseason finale. Zach Seiler, defensive lineman, agreeing to a new 3-year contract extension with the Dolphins. It keeps him in Miami through 2026. Congratulations to Zach, who was really one of the team's, best undrafted or best waiver wire finds. I was actually in Baltimore covering the Ravens when he was released. I remember writing the story when the team released Zach Seiler in the middle of the year. He was picked up by the Dolphins, latched on with them, has been an integral part of that defensive line. He had his best year to date last year, and now he was rewarded with a new contract. So congrats to him. We spoke to him a couple of hours ago about the new deal, and he just said it's a blessing. He didn't know what was going to happen after he was released from Baltimore because I was a young, late round draft pick. You just don't know. But he had an opportunity in Miami. He made the most of it, and now he's going to remain a Dolphin for the next 3 years. Now, while they locked up one member of that defensive line, another member of the group is still looking for a contract. And I'm talking about Christian Wilkins. Now, the 2019 first-round pick reported to training camp, amid that search for a new deal. He participated in practice fully for about the first 2 weeks, but as of August 5th, he stopped participating in team drills. Mike McDaniel later explained that this was essentially a hold in, him not participating in practice to kind of dispute his contract. Wait it out as that gets resolved. To date, the Dolphins and his representation have not agreed to a new deal, but he spoke for the first time since August 5th today, and he said his focus is on week 1 and being the best teammate he can be. So it's a little bit of a reversal. Obviously, we're getting closer to the regular season. There was a lot of questions about whether his holding is going to extend into the regular season. It appears that it is not now, but he still doesn't have the deal. And there's been some reporting after the fact that there's a bit of disagreement on the exact guarantee structure of that deal. Now, we know that he's one of the better defensive tackles in the NFL, an elite run stuffer. The sack numbers have not been, up there with some of the top defensive tackles that have gotten these 20 million plus a year deals in the past few months. So there still is some work to be done on that front. And just naturally with the team signing Seiler, there's a lot of questions about, could this be Wilkins' last year in Miami? He said he wants to remain in Miami. He said he didn't request a trade. There was reports that some teams talked about or called about trading for him. Naturally, it's understandable, but it looks like he's going to stay in Miami. I think the question is twofold. Maybe it might be threefold. How does this Seiler contract impact Wilkins' status? Because the Dolphins were already $30 million over the cap before they signed Zach Seiler. So this new deal, it's 3 years up to $38 million. That's only going to add to the deficit in 2024. So how does that impact Wilkins? And should they shell out the money that makes him, maybe a top 5 for a defensive tackle? Because I think that there's a fundamental question here. The fundamental question is, what is the price for an elite run stuffing defensive tackle who doesn't maybe impact the passing game in a passing league as much as his counterpart? I think that's the question right there.
I think he doesn't impact it as much as like an Aaron Donald, but I think he has an impact in the passing game, even if he doesn't get sacks.
Yeah.
And first, I think pay the man, as to quote Richard Pryor, pay the man.
He said, hey, I feel like I've done enough to get a new deal.
He
and
and his look, the hold in, this is this is like the most lightweight. This is like the most lightweight work slow down there is. Okay, it's like, okay, I'm gonna be here, I'm gonna do all this stuff, but this one thing over here, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that until you give me the money. I mean, uh, that's pretty light. That's not exactly, not exactly John V. Lewis stuff there.
I mean,
So
I will say though, he didn't play in the preseason finale, and as well as Zach Seiler, and we saw them get gashed on the ground. Like Jacksonville was having their way, and it's funny because I tweeted, I said, "Hey, the agents for Zach Seiler and Christian Wilkins, they smiling right now." And I think Drew Rosenhaus was smiling because the next morning they got the deal done. Obviously, Christian Wilkins didn't get it, but that shows the value of him. I mean, it's just
right.
but you saw the value there.
And I think also obviously he's a well-liked guy. He brings
He's a team leader.
a
He's a
certain
fan
energy
favorite. Yep.
To the defense and to the team. So
But
find
the question
find a
is,
happy
but this is
find
the
a happy medium.
but this is the question. This is the question though, because we're being practical. We're being practical. The $30 million over the salary already over the salary cap. There are $30 million over. They just paid Zach Seiler a deal that, on its based on its, without the incentives, is going to pay him about $10 million a year. That's actually a very nice deal for the Dolphins, honestly. Because if you look at the deeper stats, I mean, he's one of the most efficient defensive tackles in the NFL, was Seiler. So the question is there enough money in place, and is it practical to now pay to pay Wilkins a deal that, I mean, let's be frank, it's got to be at least $20 million. It's probably going to be upwards of $20 million.
Well, if it again, let's assume the Dolphins like have some sense here and realize it is more important to pay Christian Wilkins than it is to pay Zach Seiler.
And it seemed like they were engaged by the reporting. It seemed like they were engaged with Wilkins for several months. And according to NFL Network, the wording was once they couldn't finish it, that's when they moved to Seiler and they were able to get it done. So it seems like they definitely have been trying on that front.
Right. Okay. And I think it's also, I think you also have to look at, okay, I think it's important to pay Christian Wilkins and Christian Wilkins' relative importance to other people that have you way over the cap and what you can do with their money or them. And boy,
I mean, it's very interesting because again, we've talked about it several months ago that the construction of this current iteration, this team with these core guys, some people have said they have 2 years left before they will really have to make some tough decisions. It feels like they got 1 year before they got to make some tough decisions. Like, I mean, again, you're $30 million over the cap. You haven't paid Tua yet. You got obviously you signed Christian Wilkins. I mean, excuse me, Zach Seiler. You got him locked up, but there's still center Connor Williams. You got offensive lineman Robert Hunt. There's still some guys, some key guys that they have to lock up, and they're not going to be, I don't think, nearly as much as Christian Wilkins will cost for that deal. But again, it starts to add up. And when you're already $30 million over the cap, truthfully, their only two options are to do what they were doing the past 2 years, which is restructure some of the deals, push the money down the line. I don't know how many years or how many times the Dolphins would like to do that. Because again, right. I don't know if you can touch Teron Armstead's contract with his injury history. I don't know if you can touch, some of these contracts with guys that are getting up there in age, because, if they fall off, you're still on the hook for the money and they're not on the roster. I don't know how many times you want to do that. So it's either that.
You got a lot of dead money.
So it's either that or there's a couple guys who don't have guaranteed money next year. So you part ways with them, but then you're kind of gutting the roster a little bit, and then you still have to replace those guys as well. So, I mean, I'm very interested to talk to Chris Grier on Wednesday afternoon. I don't know how much he'll say, but the Dolphins, they're way more cap smart than me. They know that they have some stuff that they got to take care of. It's going to be very interesting to see how they do that, because again, I think everyone would love to see Christian Wilkins stay in Miami for the next 3, 4, 5 years. They love to see him retire as a Dolphin. But there's some practical questions to ask about how at this point now, signing him, how does that impact the future moves that you're able to make in the construction and the iteration of this roster in the next 1 to 2 years? Because again, it looks like there's going to be some hard decisions that they got to make in order to remain under the cap and also be in a position to still add to this roster. And we're still talking about Jonathan Taylor, so we already know that if you trade for him, you got to give him a new deal
You
as
got to give
well.
that.
So
then that's another strike, right? That's obviously another strike, kind of against that deal, is that you got guys here you got to look at paying on, and core guys that are already here, already in your locker room, already.
You got some guys coming up too. You got, obviously, this is maybe 2 years down the line, but you got Waddle, Holland, Javon Holland's eligible. Jalen Phillips is eligible. Tua might be getting a new deal next year if he stays healthy and does his thing. I think that in a perfect world, they love to keep all of them. But this is kind of like, it's funny, for so many years, like in Baltimore, like when I covered the Ravens, it was like every year there was one guy who outperformed his contract and outpriced himself from his current team, from the Ravens, and he signed somewhere else. And it sucked, but it was also kind of like a badge of honor, because it said that you were developing guys the right way, drafting the right guy. You can't keep everybody. And I think that I was thinking about the other day, I think that everyone kind of understood that the current iteration of this team wasn't going to be able to stay together for like the long term. Like there was going to be, like the money was going to run out somewhere, but I don't think that anybody anticipated that it might be Christian Wilkins. And we still don't know what's going on. He didn't say much about the state of the contract, but the more this drags on, the more you think, hey, is this something where, they might not be able to reach a point of agreement? And, they have mechanisms to keep them around. They get the franchise tag the following offseason. But then you got to commit $20 million to your cap in 1 year. And I don't know if the Dolphins are in a position to do that.
Yeah. And I just think you have to look at the downside of not signing him, and also what does that say to your team on a couple different levels, as far as just the quality of player he is, the type of person he is in the locker room, and the fact that he's drafted here, he wants to be here, he wants to, he's part of, he's already kind of part of the community. So, and then again, just like I said, he's extremely good player.
Yeah.
And that's not,
truthfully, outside of Ramsey, if you said Christian Wilkins was their best defensive player, I don't think you get a lot of objections.
And are we talking recent Ramsey, or are we talking rep Ramsey?
That's true. Yeah, I'm just saying, obviously he's injured right now, so I'm kind of taking he's injured too, and he's right. He last year,
not coming off his best, not coming off his best year.
But if you say like top 3, top 4 Dolphins players, I mean, Wilkins, you make an argument he's 2, 3.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's definitely. I mean, he's the leader. I mean, that's what he's referred to, the leader of the defense. So that'd be tough to not keep a guy around like that. He's done things the right way. He's gone about it the right way, right. And he said, "Hey, he's like, I believe in doing right by the football guys, and then they do right by you." So it is. I'm sure it is kind of tough for him right now. It's for all of his counterparts. A lot of his draft mates to get these new deals, this guaranteed, generational wealth, and it's like, hey, I'm here. I've improved every season. I can't get it. So it's tough. I think it'd be tough for the Dolphins not to bring a guy like that back. But I'm a little skeptical, and I'm very curious to see how they make it work.
I think they're going to figure out a way to. They'll figure out a way to sign him. They'll figure out a way to reach an agreement. Now, could that agreement mean that somebody else, they just say, hey, don't have it?
Yeah.
Somebody else could, and somebody who is a little more replaceable, doesn't have as
much value as
Wilkins.
Right. Yeah. That's very
much
well
value in many ways as Wilkins does. Yeah. And that's the decisions that are made all the time in the NFL. So, but yeah, I definitely think just pony it up and
make it work.
Reach a middle ground, for Pete's sake. We're yes, I know we're talking millions here, but it's come on,
check, make it work. Let's keep it moving. He said he was going to be ready to go for week 1,
and I'm sure. I'm sure he will be, and I'm sure you'd like to just get this done because I mean, you want the contract done as soon as possible because yeah, you could, you know, every play could be your last, and suddenly, you know, you get chop blocked in week 3, you know, his value could suddenly go through, he could suddenly be Enron stock, and then you're going, man, it'll be a tough break, but that happens, and so yeah, that's why he's trying to get his money now. I mean, you always
Yeah,
try to get it as soon as you can. So
yeah, it makes sense. I mean,
and he's doing it the right way. Like he's doing it the right way. He's just it's like he's there, he's practicing, he's part of the team and everything. He's not sitting at home, feet up, eating Cool Ranch Doritos and doing his own personal workouts. No, he's there with the team. He's just okay. This one thing, I'm not doing that. Nah, nah, nah. And everybody can see I'm not doing it. So
yeah, I mean, he's remained with the team. He's remained active, vocal. He said great things about Seiler. I mean, they've been like locked, at the hip, since Seiler came over in 2019, and he said, hey. He said, I'm about as happy. I'm probably happier than I am for him than I would be for myself. That just speaks to their friendship. So he was definitely a good sport. And, you could tell that even though, he's still in the middle of his contract negotiations, he said he was obviously very, happy for Seiler. So that was cool to see. And him speaking to us for the first time in a couple of weeks. Again, he's set to play the final year of his rookie contract, $10.7 million. We'll see if they can agree to anything before week 1 kicks off in just about 2 weeks. All right, that brings us to the end of another edition of the Dolphins In Depth podcast. I want to thank you guys as always for tuning in. Reminder to subscribe to the Miami Herald YouTube page, like, share, comment, as well as subscribe to the Miami Herald. We've got a ton of content out this week.
a lot of it, a lot of content.
In addition to the 53-man roster cuts, the various transactions the Dolphins made, we've been rolling out our Dolphins football preview this week. I've got a story detailing Tua's jiu-jitsu training, the benefits of it. Jordan McPherson wrote a great feature on Jalen Phillips, how this could be a potentially breakout year. We've got game-by-game predictions, so y'all can yell at me because I didn't give the Dolphins enough wins. I'm grading the Dolphins roster. David's gonna have some capsules.
Oh, I got the
coming
NFL
out.
capsules. Yeah,
we got it all in. We're talking to Chris Greer as well on Wednesday. So we're gonna have a ton of content for you in the lead up to week 1. The Dolphins are practicing. They practice today. They're practicing Wednesday and Thursday. Then they're off for the rest of the week. They come back on Monday, and then we're really kicking it into high gear for the start of week 1. The NFL season is just around the corner, and we're gonna have a fun time covering the Dolphins and seeing where they go. So definitely stay tuned and stay locked to the Miami Herald for your latest Dolphins updates. We'll be back next week to talk some more Dolphins football and preview week 1. We finally get to talk about some real football. But until then, you guys take care and we'll see you soon. See you.
Later.